going to explain something here, saying that I got a correspondence from someone I do not know if I can name him, so I will not name him. And he disputed what I was saying. He also had a criticism. I think that the criticism is something that we have heard here before. Something I know I've heard every few years, and also against things that, let's say, Rabbi Bar-Hayim has said, which is, oh, it might mislead people. That isn't that not the mainstream halachic opinion. People, if they hear what you're saying, they might actually do what you're saying, then rule on a particular position or believe that that's a halacha l'maisa. And my response is, I think that indeed, yes, that's what I was advocating. I was trying to argue for a position halacha l'maisa, and people could take it or leave it. But I think that's intellectually, honestly, the proper position to take. Okay, so that was the first thing we had to mention. We had to catch up on that. I'm going to share something on the screen right now, over here. My notes over here. Specifically, what time should the fast day end? So I was advocating for the fast day ending at sunset. The basic understanding of the Talmud is like that. I was also trying to point out that the calendar makers, when they present the time for the end of, let's say, Asara B'Tevet, the fast day which we observed last week, they don't actually present a position that fits with any of the classic understandings of when the fast day should end. If you, let's say, just study the Mishnah Torah, which is a good thing. I remember what Rav Tzuriel told me about. First, understand how the Rambam got it, because the Rambam knows what he's talking about. He has a very good understanding of a general understanding of everything, and he puts it all together. The difference between, let's say, the minor fasts, by minor fast, I mean the ones that aren't Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, and the major fast, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, is, among other things, that the Ben Hashmashroth time, that is the time, twilight, after sunset and before the stars come out, those are still part of the fasts with the major fasts, and they're not part of the fast with the minor fasts. This point is made a few times in the Talmud. It's mentioned by Maimonides, and there's something with which we aren't familiar nowadays, and that is other types of fasts, the major fasts for emergencies. It used to be if there was war, famine, drought, and other terrible things that should not happen, they used to decree fast days on alternating Mondays and Thursdays. Remember B'Av? And it used to be that the first set, hold on one second, please. We have a lot more people joining this year, but it looks like it's redundant people. Okay. It used to be that when the sages, or actually it wasn't this, like the way we refer to the sages of the Talmud, it meant the local sages, the ones who had actual authority then and there, the living ones, decreed these fast days, and the trouble did not go away. They had to decree more fast days, and with more intensity. That is, let's say the first 3 fast days, they treated them the way we treat our minor fasts. They were allowed to eat at night, and the fasts only started in the morning, and they weren't forbidden from, let's say, performing calculated labor, malacha. And then as things got worse, they made more decrees. Eventually, the fast days would start at night. That is, they would have to finish eating while it was still daytime, just like we take in Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to do Tisha B'Av again. At least we hope. I hope not. But what we've done in past years is we took in Tisha B'Av, the fast, already at night. Sure. And one of those essential differences is also, like I said, that the Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av persist even after nightfall, even after sunset, and we're supposed to break our fast at nightfall. And the minor fasts, we could be breaking our fasts already at sunset. That seems to be the way the Talmud has it. Now, I wanted to show that, considering this is what you would get, for example, from studying the Rambam. There's all these different times, so we have to first get our terms. We have to understand what terms we're talking about, and once we understand where everything is, using this as an example, we'll see why it is that the calendars do not present what is the traditional understandings. This is one understanding. This is attributed to the Geonim, as in some certain Shuvas. This is the one that you get from Maimonides. This is the one that the Gra advocates. That's the Vilna Gaon. And the case I'm using here is a 6 p.m. Oh, we have someone else here. A 6 p.m. sunset on a given day. So this is what happens. This is the objective times on this timeline. And this is what the Rabbeinu Tam, who's the first one to advocate this. By the way, Rabbeinu Tam was active in the 13th century. And the Rush was later. The Tur was the Rush's son. BYSA stands for Beis Yosef, should be Shulchan Aruch. That's, of course, the Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was mostly active in the 16th century, and the Ramah, who was his contemporary. Okay, that's where you find the Shulchan Aruch. So they'll say that 6 p.m. is sunset. Now, according to the Gra, this is an objective halachic term. Sunset means just that, and that's also the beginning of BHS, which is Ben Hashmashot, the twilight. According to the Rush and the Tur, etc., this is just the so-called first sunset. And halachically, the Shulchan Aruch says, what just happened? The T disappeared, and now I can't put it back in. That's the time when one can start accepting an early Sabbath, whereas over here, actually, Tosefes Shabbos, accepting Shabbos early would start even well before sunset. And then there's the positions, exactly how long does it take for the stars to come out after sunset? Now, I presented the two major positions here. It depends on how long it takes a person to walk a so-called Roman mile. A Roman mile back in the day was basically a kilometer nowadays. Yeah, but I don't understand what most of us don't think in kilometers. I mean, the metric system is inherently unuseful in that regard. Sorry. And there's been greater research into this issue. One of Rabbi Bar-Hayim's colleagues has pointed out that it seems the sages assumed it took even less time to walk a Roman mile, a kilometer, under standard conditions. A grown man walking during normal weather, etc. So there's two major understandings. It takes 18 minutes to walk a mile. That seems to be the Gro's opinion, or 24 minutes to walk this Roman mile. And they say that the stars come out, the Seitha Kochavim, appearance of the stars, that's nightfall, is 3/4 of a mile walk. So 3/4 of 18 minutes is 13 and a half minutes. So the stars would come out 13 and a half minutes after sundown, or 18 minutes. 18 is 3/4 of 24, if I got my math right. And that should be it. You could ask then, well, what time does the Sabbath end? And the answer is the Sabbath ends basically at these two times. Wait a minute, I checked my calendar. In New York, they say the Sabbath is out almost 45 minutes after the sun sets. Correct. That was a public policy decision imposed by great rabbis of the past because it's very important to add to the Sabbath. And also, they were afraid that if they would actually tell people the true time, then they would maybe even end sometimes the Sabbath too early. And that's not good. So it's a public policy decision that, for example, the calendars I have here tell me that the Sabbath ends 35 minutes after sundown. But really, if I had to do something that I could not do on the Sabbath, but I really have to do right as the Sabbath ends for whatever reason, if it was a matter of pikuach nefesh, I should even do it on Shabbos. But if it's something that could wait, but really I shouldn't be delaying too much, technically speaking, this is when the Sabbath comes out. In past shiurim, I've mentioned that is my belief that this difference actually can be seen empirically, and there's a reason for it. If you have perfect conditions, that is, let's say you were on the Mediterranean Sea watching the sunset, and it's perfectly clear. It's a perfectly clear night, and there's also no moon, and there was as little pollution and I guess atmospheric pollution and light pollution getting in your way, then you would see the three medium-sized stars come out by 13 and a half minutes after sunset. But the problem is, most of the time there are not perfect conditions, and in that case, it usually takes about 18 minutes for the stars to come out. So I guess the Rambam and the Vilna Gaon can shake hands on this one. It just depends on the conditions. So this is ideal, and this is more what it is practically. The Rambam says this almost explicitly. He says it takes just less than a third of an hour for the stars to come out. That would be about here. That's what they say. Now, the problem with Rabbeinu Tam's approach is that he fundamentally disagrees about what sunset is. He claims that there's a second halachic sunset. That's what we have over here, and that's, like you see, 3 1/4 mile walks from the first sunset. The first sunset is when you see the sunset, but that's not it. It's only sometime much later when we have this halachic sunset. You can see there's a major discrepancy here. It depends on how long you have to walk a mile. If it takes 18 minutes to walk a mile, so 3¼ 18-minute miles after sunset is like we have here 6:58 and a half minutes. And if you say it takes 24 minutes to walk a mile, then you have the second halachic sunset, whatever that is, at 7:08. The Vilna Gaon rejects this approach of Rabbeinu Tam. It doesn't really matter how long it takes him to walk a mile. The point is that he doesn't agree with this whole idea of a second sunset because it's not anything anybody could actually discern, and also it has too many consequences that make it that it's almost a halachic impossibility that there ever is even the stars coming out or a dawn in certain parts of the world. So he rejects this out of hand. But this is the approach, by the way, that was mentioned by Rabbeinu Tam. Basically, you have a whole line of major halachic authorities. The codes basically follow Rabbeinu Tam. And the Mishnah Berurah points out this was the dominant opinion within Judaism, or what you say, the majority opinion within Judaism for a few centuries, close to 1,000 years, until people started really following the Vilna Gaon, and after that, the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring the Vilna Gaon l'kula. That means as leniency. He brings it as just another stringency. Should take in Shabbos by sunset, but you still should let it out as late as you can, according to Rabbeinu Tam. The Vilna Gaon wouldn't agree with that. The Vilna Gaon would say, no, you could use my opinion, which is technically the old opinion, for all intents and purposes and any halachic matters that may come up. So this is the Rabbeinu Tam time, and then the stars come out sometime much later. Here, the Vilna Gaon's approach says that yes, 72 minutes, that's 4 18-mile walks after sunset, all the stars become visible. That is mentioned in the Talmud, but that's not a halachic issue. That's just telling you that if you had a person starting to walk all day long, then by 7:12, he has no natural light to help him walk, and he has to end his journey there. Or it could be that if it takes 24 minutes to walk one of these Roman miles, and 4 times 24-minute walk, it would lead us to 7:36 in the evening. Whereas Rabbeinu Tam says that this is the time actually halachic tzeis. It is 3/4 of an 18-minute or 3/4 of a 24-minute mile walk from the halachic sunset. The halachic sunset, according to him, is here. So this would be 13 and a half minutes later. If I got that right, if I get it wrong, someone tell me. And this would be also not 13 and a half, but 18 minutes after that time. Okay, 18 minutes after his halachic sunset, which would be over here. So this approach says, and this is why it's very important. Why? Because the Talmud says that the fast is over at sunset, unless it's a public fast. Like I said, a so-called public fast, which I mentioned here, Yom Kippur, Nanav, and the later sets of emergency fasts on alternating Mondays and Thursdays. So you ask, but when is halachically sunset? In this column, halachically sunset is at 6. So if the calendars want to present the classic opinion, my correspondent said this is a minority opinion at best, and I don't know what that means. Like I said last week, there hasn't been a deliberate body that has sat and discussed these issues and then taken a vote on the matter, and this seems to have been the only opinion that appears in the literature up until the 13th century. So I don't understand what it means to call this a minority opinion, perhaps one that we shouldn't follow. I strongly feel that if there was a nice calendar, let's say a Torah Eretz Yisrael calendar that we could print up, this is what we should present, because this seems to be what the Talmud is saying and what was understood. So that's when sunset. And in our example, it's just 6 p.m. Very good. According to Rabbeinu Tam and everybody else, the second halachic sunset is over here at 6:58. And not only that, they have this, I guess, like the Beis Yosef says, this whole limud, a long halachic argument for why actually the fast should be over at nightfall. Basically, because it's very hard to discern when this time is, this second halachic sunset, so we just wait until the stars come out, according to this opinion. So if you were printing a calendar and you wanted to present, let's say, the Shulchan Aruch, none other than the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah's opinion about when Asara B'Tevet should end, they should be printing over here one of these two times, either 7:12 or 7:36. Why? Because it's sometime after sunset. And if you look in the calendars present none of these positions. Absolutely none of them. The calendars present a sort of a hybrid position that we are looking for the fast to end at Seith, as per all the decisors in this column, but they define Seith as do the ones in this column. So they'll tell you the fast ended. I don't think they use this 13 and a half minutes time. They say, I don't know, about 20 minutes or something like that, usually a time closer to this. And that is why I think the calendars are misleading people and they should be fixed. And I'm going to stand by what I said in that regard. So that brings us to the conclusion of this. It's very important to know that it's okay to follow Rabbeinu Tam and the Beis Yosef's opinion. As a matter of fact, I know someone who actually takes this quite seriously. There are people who do this every Sabbath. However, I do not know why anybody would, let's say, follow this opinion, l'chumra, on a fast day. Don't forget, Tasar B'Teves and Shavasar B'Tammuz, the rest of them, they're not even rabbinically ordained anymore. They used to exist, and Am Yisrael has basically adopted them as a strict minhag. But there is no rabbinic commandment per se to fast on those days. And you can see the Rabbi Bar-Hayim has also put up a host of shiurim and sources on this topic. So it's strange that they would be stringent for these opinions when it comes to the fasts, but when it comes to the very important biblical commandment to observe the Sabbath and not to perform for calculated labor on the Sabbath, which is the most severe prohibition of the Torah. It's a prohibition that is punished for one who violates it with stoning. That's how you know how severe the prohibition is. When it comes to that, they're just happy to follow the standard opinions now that do not weight anything close to what Rabbeinu Tam and the Beis Yosef say about when to let the Sabbath out. So if we're not machmir for Shabbos, I understand why we should be machmir for everything else. And that concludes that. Now, there was something else that my correspondent did argue well, I think. I still am not convinced, unfortunately, for him. Why is it saying we're ending the meeting? Everybody still with us? Yeah, okay, fine. We're still here. This was something that he argued, that perhaps the Vilna Gaon himself does not hold the way I presented regarding the fast ending. And that is, I was saying that the Vilna Gaon would hold over here, that the fast is over at sunset. And I stand by that because when it comes to the actual halacha, the Vilna Gaon seems to say that. However, it is also true that elsewhere in his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, specifically Yoreh Deah Mark 266 and Orach Chaim Mark 261, he seems to bring up an interesting position that specifically regarding these fasts, it is still proper to have obey a stringency whereby the fast ends at Seith. See, according to the Vilna Gaon, the fast should be over at this time. Now, I do believe that the Vilna Gaon brought that up, but I also believe that the Vilna Gaon brought that up in the name of the Rush and the Tur and others who make certain assumptions that the Vilna Gaon had already spent quite a lot of, he spilled a lot of ink already dismissing their assumptions. And then he's showing that their assumptions lead to perhaps even saying that is absurd. My correspondent also pointed out that if we do come to this conclusion, there are some absurdities that come out. We will see them forthwith. And I hope that this is a venue in which I am asking the people who are watching to please ask their questions or correct me if something's wrong. I hope that we'll be able to get through this together. I'm going to put that on the screen right now. Maybe I have it in here. But I think it's to understand what the Gross says about a fast day, it's good to just see it inside. Okay, we've seen what the fast day said, what the last week we saw what the Beis Yosef says. So today we're going to look at it here. I'm going to put the words of the Vilna Gaon directly on the screen. I'm using here the Friedman edition of the Shulchan Aruch. Why do we use the Friedman edition? Which of these two is it? Hold on one second, please. It's this one. Okay. Everybody see this on the screen? Okay. So here's what we have here. This is where the Shulchan Aruch says something that's kind of strange. Like I said, it seems to be oxymoronic. Why? Because the Shulchan Aruch quotes the 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 Talmud, and then the Shulchan Aruch seems to give a parish of the Talmud that doesn't fit what we see. What does it say? The Shulchan Aruch says any fast upon which the sun has not set. That's the way the Talmud has it. And then it says, then he adds, Dahainu. That is, on which one has not fasted until nightfall is not a fast. So which one is it? As we saw in this chart over here, sunset and nightfall are not the same thing. Unless you hold, and this is something very interesting, according to Rabbi Yossi. Let's look over here. Let's first get some ground rules on here. If you look in Masechah Shabbos, towards the end of the second parak, it talks about Bameh Madlikin. How do we light the Shabbos candles? So it talks about the time of lighting Shabbos candles, and it talks about this entire sugya, the definitions like I gave here. Rabbah is the Amorah in Bavel who said that this Ben Hashmashoth time basically takes 3/4 of a mile walk. Rav Yosef says it takes 2/3 of a mile walk. As you can see from, let's say, the codes, the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam, etc., mention Rabbah's opinion. For whatever reason, we hold like Rabbah over Rav Yosef. It takes 3/4 of a mile walk, however long it takes to walk a mile, they don't say. And Maimonides certainly holds like Rabbah, and he says also it takes 24 minutes to walk such a mile. And the difference, by the way, between Rabbah and Rav Yosef is if you say it only takes 18 minutes to walk a mile, so Rabbah says 3/4 of that is 13.5. Rav Yosef would say 3/4 of that is 12. So it's a difference of 1.5 minutes. It's not that much. Also, there's a position of Rabbi Yehuda. He asks, when does Ben Hashmashoth start? When does twilight start? He says it starts at sunset, and its duration is basically subject to dispute by Rabbah and Rav Yosef. Is it 3/4 of a mile or 2/3 of a mile walk? Fine. And then there's Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashoth, which he says is the blink of an eye. It's basically an instant in time. So, according to Rabbi Yossi, there's halachic sunset, and then there's when the stars come out, and there's not a significant amount of time that anybody could really discern between the two. The Gemara also concludes there. Gemara in Shabbos, I think it's Daf Lamed Daled and Daf Lamed Hey. The Gemara there concludes by saying that it only begins right after Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashoth is over. So we have 3 events in rapid succession. We have halachic sunset, then we have twilight, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and then the stars come out according to Rabbi Yehuda. And then immediately thereafter, Rabbi Yossi says, no, then there's the halachic sunset, and then the blink of an eye, and you already get to the stars coming out again. So why do we say this? There's a Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. We're going to get to there in a minute, which is dismissed, I believe, by the Rambam. But now that we're...
Wait.
Yeah, please.
Why do you say stars come out according to Rabbi Yehuda? He only cares about when the sky becomes gray. The stars come out much later after that, which seems to correspond to Rabbi Yossi's opinion, which seems to be, a significant amount of time after Rabbi Yehuda.
Is it a significant amount of time?
I mean, half of the sky becoming gray and then all of the stars coming out takes some period of time.
Yeah, they say that. There's a lot of argument there about what's going on. There's even a Talmudic question about what do you mean by turning gray? But the Gemara concludes there. I don't have the Gemara in front of me. You want to open it up? The Gemara concludes that it's basically their rapid succession. There's one after the other, although Tosfos makes a diuk saying there might be an amount of time between them, but he doesn't even offer how long it is, if anything. Okay? But the Gemara does conclude that whatever it is, this Ben Hashmashoth for Rabbi Yehuda does start right after sunset. And whenever Ben Hashmashoth ends, that's when the stars are out, for better or for worse. I think there's a lot more to argue about this. A lot of this just seems to be a mitzias, like Puk B'chazi. Why do we need to offer 2/3 of a mile or 3/4 of a mile? Why don't they just go outside and look, right? It's a good question, right? Jan, you there? I think we lost him.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just, I didn't bring the Gemara here. I guess you could put it up on the screen, but what we want to see is over here. We want to focus on this right now. Are you familiar with the sugya?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So if you want to get it and put it on the screen, like you could fetch it while I was going to get this, and we could see this, or I could just actually look for it right now. Okay. there's a particular line in the Gemara you want me to focus on, you should tell me. So it's over here. Here, this over here. Remember with this line? Here's the line we're focusing on. You would have said that Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashoth is Meshach Shaykh. What is Meshach Shaykh? You understand it to be that it's concurrent with that of Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashoth. Okay? Kamash Malon, Dishlim Ben Hashmashoth to Rabbi Yehuda, V'hadar Maschil Ben Hashmashoth to Rabbi Yossi. Okay? The Ben Hashmashoth of Rabbi Yehuda comes to an end or is completed. And then that's right, and then that's when Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashoth begins. So if his Ben Hashmashoth comes to an end, that means it's the stars come out. But according to Rabbi Yossi, that's only the beginning of his Ben Hashmashoth. So that's what I was assuming there. Does that make sense? Anybody there? I thought.
Yes.
Okay. So
it just says V'hadar Matchil. It doesn't. It doesn't say anywhere that it has to be immediately afterwards.
Yeah. Okay.
It could be sometime after.
Okay, it could be, but it seems that there was the assumption made by these Rishonim is that you were talking about the Tosfos on the next side. What is it over here? What does he say here? Mishum Shiur reported the Hakim Tarif Ayin Lavi Lil Mifsak Rabbi Yossi. You remember that Tosfos there? You there? Oh, I'm gonna lose you here. It's good we're chavrusing here. Rabbi Yochanan's next statement, remember?
Yes.
Sorry. So you're familiar with there. The Tosfos basically say that it seems that the way we just understood this is that a Shiur Purta doesn't really matter if like I just presented, Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashoth came to an end. Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashoth just started and came to an end also. What's the nafka mina? If you're telling the Kohanim that they have to wait for just a little bit longer, is it really significant? So the Tosfos' answer, I think you're familiar with this. The way you're asking the question is that where's the key line over here? Okay. Okay. See, you got Tosfos on your mind that perhaps Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmash was just some other vague time afterwards, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the problem with that is, can you offer me, or maybe perhaps I haven't seen this, and I think that's why they assume this. I think also the Vilna Gaon assumes this. When is Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashos, if not immediately after Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashos?
Well, I think you could understand Rabbi Yossi to be the, I guess, progenitor of the Braitha that says that 1 star is day, 2 stars is Ben Hashmashot, 3 stars is night. And the period between 1 star and 3 stars is very short. And that seems to be the maskana of the Gemara. And we actually have some Geonim that paskin like that, the halacha, that after Shkia until the stars come out is still day. So
okay, how long is that? How long is that?
Until any of the stars come out?
Yeah, I mean just the objective time. We're trying to use numbers here.
Well, it depends how long you say a meal is, right?
No, you just that's the whole point. Why did Chazal start talking about time it takes a person to walk? Just tell them to look at the stars, right?
Right.
Okay, so what does it come out to be? That's the question. Where you don't see this chart here. I put this other thing on the screen and I'm pointing to it and you don't see what I'm pointing to. Okay. My question is, for those of us at home, when are we going to put Rabbi Yossi's opinion over here?
If it's just at the appearance of the stars and it's like Kicharaf Ein, then it's around the time when the stars begin coming out. So one of those two. But the whole point is that any time before that is still halachic day.
Okay, good. That is the point that we're trying to say. If my only point was that Rabbi Yossi's time of Ben Hashmashot, etc., is after Rabbi Yehuda's time. Okay, that you have this succession of events. Indeed, according to Rabbi Yossi, it's still daytime before his Heref Ayin Ben Hashmashot, whenever that is. that is not something that we were focusing on just yet, or a point that we wanted to avoid. Okay. I was working with
Okay.
Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. It seems that the Rambam holds like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. The Vilna Gaon insists on it that there's sunset and then it takes 3/4 of a mile. Rabbi Yossi's main opinion is that it's a harif ayin. That's the point. That the Ben Mashot is so short, there's not a significant amount of time between Rabbi Yossi's sunset and Rabbi Yossi's stars coming out. Okay?
Okay. It's a bit strange because you go outside, you watch the sunset, then the eastern horizon becomes red for a second or for a little bit, a minute or something after Shkia. And then, a few minutes later, the sky becomes gray, is Hirsif. And then sometime after, but it's not immediate, sometime after you actually start seeing stars.
Okay. There are sometimes even at the beginning you start seeing stars.
Don't those stars not count? Those are Kochavim Gedolim.
Yeah, so that's why people don't know what they're looking at. I would think that you should be looking on the opposite side of the sky also. That the it's interesting when people look at these stars. What do you notice? They're looking at the top of the sky or the middle of the sky. If the opposite side of the sky, the eastern sky, is darker than the western side, you'd expect to see stars come out there earlier, right? Have you done this yourself? Have you tried to look at this yourself?
Yes, I have. Although I live in an area with some amount of light pollution, so
Okay.
they kind of appear around the dome of the sky, I guess.
Yeah, it's very interesting how this works. I don't know enough about this, or have done enough myself. I'm more normally just looking for the moon, and I realize wherever I live, it's extreme light pollution. So we're missing a little practical experience here. The point of bringing all this up, now I'm still sharing this over here. I think you see this. Okay, so you see what I wrote over here. Okay, Rabbi Yossi's bin Hashemashah. Tell me if you agree with this statement over here. Rabbi Yehuda's bin Hashemashah starts at sunset duration of the previous dispute. See how long this is. Rabbi Yossi's bin Hashemashah lasts as long as the blink of an eye, but only begins after Rabbi Yehuda's bin Hashemashah concludes. That's basically what we come from the Talmud. And we want to argue, like Tosfos says, perhaps how long after the conclusion. Whatever it is, Rabbi Yossi's bin Hashemashah only starts after Rabbi Yehuda's ends, which means there's a certain time of day, which according to Rabbi Yehuda is certainly night, and according to Rabbi Yossi is still day. Okay, it might be very short, it might be very long, but the point is they're a little bit mutually exclusive. That's what the Gemara is trying to say, that there's no overlap. Okay, and these three events happen in rapid succession. Whatever Rabbi Yossi says, sunset, Ben Hashmashos, and nightfall. So tell me if this is okay now, so we can move ahead with that.
I think you can continue. We'll see what else you have to say.
But this paragraph is kosher, right?
I don't know. I'm still a little. I don't know the last sentence. I'm not so sure about. But
three events. That's Rabbi Yossi's sunset, Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashos, and Rabbi Yossi's stars coming out. Nightfall.
What do you mean by rapid succession? Is sunset is when sunsets. His Ben Hashemashos is when one star comes out. That's like 15, 20 minutes after. And then night, which is like the second or two after.
I'm saying that he seems to say it's a harif ayin when he says a harif ayin.
Yes, between one star and three stars coming out is a harif ayin.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay.
So there we go. Oh, maybe what did he mean by harif ayin? It's interesting that he uses that term. I've got to think about this. Why does he said it like that? Okay, perhaps we'll think about this. Okay, fine. Anything else? Do you think I should adjust this then?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's what I wrote here. The blink of an eye. Okay, literally the blink of an eye, whatever that means. So over here we have the statement in the Shulchan Aruch. Once again, you don't see it. I'm going to change what I have here. Here's the Bar-Hayim Torah. We're back on the same page. Okay. They can now see the application. Good. So this is the Shulchan Aruch says Ad Seif Kochavim. Is this? Can you guys read this at all? Is it big enough? Here, I'll expand it. Drop. This is where the Shulchan Aruch says the Seif Kochavim. That's when the fast is over, technically. And the Vilna Gaon says this is what the Rush says. You can find this at the end of Tainus in his commentary there, and also the Mordechai. And they says, but the Gemara says in Psachim over here that they argue regarding Tisha B'Av, Benash Mashot Shalo Asur. Tisha B'Av, the point there in the Gemara is that Benash Mashot, that is during twilight, sometime the time between sunset and the stars coming out, the nightfall, stars coming out is nightfall, it's still Asur, that is eating and drinking are still forbidden at that point. Mashma Dushar Tanith Vadai Mutar, which the implication thereof is that the rest of the fast days, it is already permissible to eat. Correct? That was the argument we were making. And that seems to be, by the way, what you'd get if you'd read just what Maimonides says. And then he says, however, the Mordechai, at the end of the first parak in Tanith, and this is Simon, which I did bring over here. Maybe I could show it on the screen. I'll bring it, get off the bookshelf for everybody to see the underlined parts. Brings up what Rabbeinu Elchanan says, that it's a svara. Svarahu ad tzedek chavim. It doesn't say in the Talmud anywhere that the fast should end at the stars coming out. There's a good svara for it. There's an argument. Okay? And if you then argue against this, say, yeah, but the whole Tisha B'Av thing, Tisha B'Av is supposed to be different than the other fast days. The answer is, Yesh lomar shainu elu yoma be'apuka yoma. That's a good answer. What is this line? This is a loaded line. This loaded line is from the Talmud, explaining why, when it with regards to, let's say, the Sabbath, we take the Sabbath in by sunset, but we only let the Sabbath out after the stars come out, because that whole time twilight is a safek. We should treat it like a safek. We will begin Shabbos before the safek time, and the next day we will only let out the Sabbath after the safek time. So too, we should do that with the fast. You have a fast. Your fast should end when the day is over, being that you don't really know if the day is over at sunset, so just wait until the day is certainly over. It extends the chumrah even to the fast day. Does that make sense? That's at least the argument that's presented by Rabbeinu Elchanan and in the Mordechai. And you can find that in Hagos Maimonios. The rejoinder to this argument is, yes, with regards to the Sabbath and Tisha B'Av, I know that's why I am fasting, because Tisha B'Av was ordained by the sages as a severe fast. It's patterned after Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a holy day, the holiest non-Sabbath day of the year, and it's a biblical prohibition to eat on Yom Kippur and perform forbidden labor, etc. So when Yom Kippur comes in, I make sure not to do anything during the Banish Mashoth at the beginning. So I certainly am fasting by sunset. And when Yom Kippur comes to an end, I'm still fasting until the stars come out, until nightfall. So I should do that also with regards to the Sabbath. But with regards to, let's say, Asara B'Tevet, which has not been ordained by the sages to be such a severe fast. For example, the sages let me eat all night on Asara B'Tevet, as long as I don't go to sleep with the intention to wake up the next morning and already be fasting, because then my fast starts when I go to sleep. The point is, all night long until 11 o'clock, I'm staying up. I can continue eating and drinking. It's not a Asara B'Tevet. So this argument by the Mordechai is already itself sort of weak. Remember, the Vilna Gaon just calls it a Sfarah. And over here, he says that you could find this there. And then he brings up Rabbeinu Yonah, okay? And the Rush in these sources over here wrote that Kasvu Devena Shmoshoth B'Tanit Yachid Mutar Afilu Ba Puke Yoma. Even though they seem to be arguing based on the Sfarah that one should keep all his fasts, let's say a Sarah B'Tevet and Som Gedalia, he should keep them all until nightfall, Misvara, just because. I guess I would call this a Chumrah Lishma. There's a Chumrah, so keep it. But it doesn't tell you if the Chumrah is honestly what the sages asked for, especially because the Chumrah seems to be going against what is explicit in the Talmud. They said at least a Tainus Yachid. What's a Tainus Yachid? An individual's fast. An individual's fast is a fast that a person accepts upon himself for whatever reason. Perhaps he had a bad dream and he wants to repent, or it says that there's an old minhag that people would fast the day that their one of their parents passed away. So they agree that that says the Russian Rabbeinu Yonah do give an argument that the Tainus Yachid is certainly over when it's over by the time, we get to Ben Hashmashot. Now, my argument is that certainly you know that Rabbi Bar-Hayim is very lenient with regards to what are known as the minor fasts, correct? You've seen his published opinion. There's people. I think that even people have stopped fasting based on his view on certain of these fast days. Is that correct? Leon or Benjamin can correct me if I'm wrong about that, right?
Well, he's made it. The Bar-Hayim has made it clear that it's optional, and therefore there are some people who choose not to fast. Yeah, there are people, certainly are.
So that would mean that these Taniyot are not basically. Which bucket do we put our Asar B'Teves or our Tzom Gedalia into? Do we put it with Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur on one hand, so we'd have to keep them until nightfall, or do we put them in the more lenient bucket and they're actually over at sunset, just as the Talmud assumes? Okay, so the Vilna Gaon saying that at least the Rosh and the Rabbeinu Yonah, the Rosh, by the way, is in Rabbeinu Tom's camp, and he seems to follow this Mordechai also, that it's a good svara to keep the fast until Sefer Kochavim. They do grant that there are certain fasts that are over at sundown, which is significantly beforehand. And he also says this seems to be the pashtus of the Gemara, mashma pashtus of the Gemara, and it says the Gemara says feko mutter. Okay, the suffix of these fasts, that is when you get to the suffix zone, bin hashmashos, it's already okay to eat. And then it tells you to look up Tosfos and Avodah Zarah, what they say there regarding this. It's a long Tosfos, so I'll put that on the screen also for the benefit of our viewers over here. Well, basically over here, if you're reading this, the Vilna Gaon has basically told you that this whole idea that the Shulchan Aruch had, the fast day is over at sundown, but sundown in this case means Seder Kochavim. It's because if you look in the sources he cites, they hold like Rabbeinu Tam, or they just have another svar. Rabbeinu Tam says, we already saw the Beis Yosef says, what's that argument? You don't know when Rabbeinu Tam's halachic sunset is, so just wait until the star's coming out, and that's actually quite later than the actual sunset. So I'm going to stop here so I could share a different thing on the screen. This piece of Tosfos that I photographed. Nope, that's not it. That's just my files. Share screen. Here it is. Here, Tosfos of Avodah Zarah. Do you guys see this? I can't even see it. I'm sharing with you, but I can't see it. Here it is. This is the critical line from that Tosfos, right in the middle of Tosfos of Avodah Zarah, Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. See, in Shabbos it's page 34, and Avodah Zarah it's also page 34, which I think helps us to remember where we're dealing with. Okay. So it says here, he says the Tosfos just brings up as a tangent. This wasn't necessarily there, but it's one of those long Tosfos which brings up a lot of different points. It says Umasha anu nohagim. Concerning that, we have a practice with anoth ad sefer kochavim, that we fast until the stars come out. Afal gav damrinum befer kamat tainis kol tainis shalosh shakalav chama eno tainis. Even though it says explicitly in the first chapter of the tractate Tainus that any Tainus upon which the sun has not set is not considered a Tainus. So it says that that's the line, sunset. Eno Tainus, remember it's not considered a Tainus. So the implication is you have to wait until sunset to complete the fast. Mashma divishkiyatha chamasachi seems to imply that with the setting of the sun, we've fasted enough. So break your fast at sunset. He says, yeah, but we have a minhag that we wait longer. How much longer? Who hey milin kodin sefer kochavim. By the way, this sunset seems to be 5 miles walk before sefer kochavim. 5 miles. Yes, that's a different girsa. Is it that it takes a person can walk from sunset or sundown until nightfall 4 miles or 5 miles? So this girsa has 5 miles. So also a significant amount of time. And then there's some who say that it works out. It's either 4 miles of 24 minutes or 5 miles of about 18 minutes. The difference there is 4 times 24 is 96. 5 times 18 is 90. Whatever it works out, it's still well over an hour after the actual sunset. So really, we would wait this much longer to break our fast. Why? Lo machtinan nafshin lisfeka. We don't want to get involved in sfekas. Now that's a good argument. If I were talking about a biblical prohibition, a severe biblical prohibition, let's say not violating the Sabbath or not wanting to desecrate Yom Kippur by eating, I can understand why fast end once it's completely nightfall. But for issues that are not biblical fasts, once again, our fast days like Asar B'Teves are not even rabbinically commanded. There's no rabbinical commandment to fast thereon. It's something that developed naturally, like the Rambam points out. There was no necessary, not even necessarily a takana that it did. It just from the time of the Nevi'im they did, and they fasted these fasts. And when the temple was rebuilt, they stopped fasting them. Although Maimonides says they still observe Tisha B'Av. They did not observe Tisha B'Av, by the way we observe Tisha B'Av. It didn't mean that Tisha B'Av was a day where they took off their shoes and sat on the floor and read Eicha and cried and mourned the destruction of the first temple. You can imagine Maccabean times when they had just reasserted themselves and they had new holidays celebrating the inauguration of the temple. Tisha B'Av was observed as a fast day for repentance, more like a minor Yom Kippur. They would fast from, let's say, starting in the morning until the evening, and they would say it was a preemptive repentance, but it wasn't the whole sit down and cry Tisha B'Av, which we are familiar. And that's the first argument. We don't want to get involved in the Safek. Perhaps when it says the sun sets, it means completely set. What is this? This is a code word, like Leon could tell us. Shakal Lagamre is a reference to Rabbeinu Tam's opinion that there's the first sunset, the physical sunset, and then for the next almost whatever it is it just less than an hour, just more than an hour, the sun is setting until we get to the so-called second sunset or the end of the sunset, and that's the halachic sunset. So you see here, this Tosfos basically says, bottom line, where do you get these arguments for keeping your fast day until the stars come out? You get it from two points in Tosfos. There are 2 points you could find in these sources he gave you. It's a suffix, therefore just keep fasting anyways until the stars come out, or because you hold like Rabbeinu Tam, and you still have to fast until the stars come out. Either way, the conclusion that I draw from the Vilna Gaon discussing here, this is in Hilchos Tainus, is that he does not hold of the whole idea that the fast goes until Tzedek Chavim, like you would find in the Tur or in the Rush or in these other sources, and it's just simply what the Talmud actually said it was. That's using what we know. So I think that that's pretty clear. But the problem is, this is certainly far from clear. The Vilna Gaon definitely gives us a different view of things if we read what he says in Hilchos Shabbos or Hilchos Mila. But first, we'll pause now for anybody who has a question about that. Any questions there? Anybody want to challenge that? Because there were other people who were listening before who did want to challenge that. Anybody? No? Okay. So I'm trying to think of the best way. What's the best sources that we could put on the screen for everybody over here? So I think I'll put on my notes because that's the one that puts it all together. Okay. Is anybody familiar with the Vilna Gaon writes on Mark 261 over there? They don't want to bore anybody with this. I wish I could put on, or perhaps someone who's more tech savvy than I am and can tell me how I could share 2 of these documents at the same time. Anybody? No? Okay.
You could share your desktop. You could share your
desktop. Point where we see it, the Vilna Gaon is insisting. What?
You could share your desktop and then put 2 windows on your desktop.
This is the Gra and his relationship to sunset. In Maisarav 235 to 230. What? I heard something again. Internet connection unstable. Okay. So let's wait until it stabilizes. Someone trying to say something there? Someone out in internet land? Leon, was that you?
If you share your desktop and then you open 2 windows, there you could share 2 windows at the same time.
Well, I should be sharing my emails with everybody. Hold on. Okay, now I'll try to do this. Away the pictures of the kids. Hold on a second. Okay, I want to find the Vilna Gaon for this. Okay, in a minute. First, we're going to this is the entire thing. So we don't need I don't have a picture of this. This is the entire text. I took this from Sefaria. Is that how we pronounce them? Sefaria? Anybody know? I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know what they call themselves. So we have in Maisarav that the Vilna Gaon actually exerted himself to make sure to light the Hanukkah candles at sunset. Why? Because the Talmud says to light the Hanukkah candles at sunset. And the Shulchan Aruch says lighting the candles at sunset, but then the Shulchan Aruch says the end of sunset. And if you modify sunset, it means you're holding like Rabbeinu Tam, that there's a beginning of sunset and there's an end of sunset. Or there's the first sunset and the end, or the second sunset. So when the Shulchan Aruch says light your Hanukkah candles right away at the end of sunset, the Vilna Gaon says, yeah, that's the Rambam's language at sunset, except for this whole thing, that word end. Okay, so shows Sifa Mechaber b'divrei Tur Moshe Kasav Lamata. He added this from the Tur because the Tur holds like Rabbeinu Tam that there's an end of sunset. That's when you should light your candles. He says, and this also seems to be the opinion of the Bahag, and the Rashba and the Ran also wrote that a person could light his Hanukkah candles earlier because halachically speaking, what do we do on Shabbos? We light our candles before sunset, right? If you light your candles at sunset, Hanukkah candles at sunset on Shabbos, you're basically violating Shabbos because Shabbos is starting at sunset, like we just seen already a few times. Okay, so you can light your candles even a little bit beforehand. And then he says over here, Sof Shkia, okay? The end of the Shkia. That's what the Tur wrote, King Katav Hatur. So too the Rush did in the first chapter of Tainus, when it says, once again, any fast day that didn't last until sunset, in which the sun has not set. And it also says that in Brachos, a similar idea. The Gemara Brachos is telling us that why the Mishnah begin and say you're supposed to say Kriya Shema at night when the Kohanim are eating their truma. And the Gemara said, when's that? When the Kohanim eat their truma? Oh, that's when nightfall happens. That's when the stars come out. That's when you say Shema. That's when the Sabbath ends. Okay, and the pasuk that teaches us this, that Kohanim have to actually wait for nightfall in order to be fully pure and then eat their truma, is pasuk in Vayikra. It says that the Kohen who's tamei mikrei laila, he has to wash his should wash his flesh with water, and then it says Uvah Hashemesh, the sun will set, vitaher. And Rashi points out in the Gemara, the Rambam quotes this in Hilchos Truma. He says, Bi'as Shimsho Chule, that means first he has to wait for his sun to set, and then vitaher. Then it'll be purified. It doesn't mean the Kohen will be purified with the sunset. It means he has to wait until the sky is purified of all its light. That is when nightfall happens. I'll read you the way the Rambam has it. It's similar to the way Rashi has it. Basically, the halacha. Nope, I don't have my Zroim here. Okay, I only have the second section, but it's in the right parak of Truma there. The Rambam quotes this Gemara. So it means vitaher refers to the nightfall. And then he says in the Rashba, the Ram, Mashba, the Hedya, Shehu Tchilas HaShkia. If you read the Rashba and Ran, it should be at the beginning of the Shkia. Even according to Rabbeinu Tam, who holds of a beginning and end of Shkia, you should light your Hanukkah candles at the beginning of Shkia, which is, for those of us, the only Shkia. Yeah, but the problem is there it seems to be the Shkia Shnia. And then he tells you, look in Mordechai. The Shekasav the Lashon Mishatishka Muchakshu Tchilas HaShkia. What is this a reference to? Rabbeinu Tam basically talks about these two shkiyas because according to Rabbeinu Tam, like I brought down here, there's a difference between mishkiyata chama, from when the sun sets, and misha tishka, once it has set. Okay, according to Rabbeinu Tam, this one means the end of sunset, misha tishka, once it is fully set, and mishkiyata chama means at the setting of the sun, or what is the beginning of the shkia. So the Mordechai argues with Rabbeinu Tam, although he basically grants a lot of what Rabbeinu Tam's saying, this diuk of the Lashon, he disagrees. And Vilna says, whatever you hold about what Shkia is, Misha Tishka Chama does mean when the sun actually sets. And that's the Cheni Kar. That's when you should be lighting your candles. So according to everybody, the Vilna says, you should be lighting your Hanukkah candles when the sun sets. Okay, and he connects these two. There he says, Hanukkah, basically, I paraphrase this over here. Talmud says the fast is over at sundown, and one should light Hanukkah candles at sundown. Some translate sundown into something else, but for these laws, sundown is sundown. That's why the Gra lit his candles at sundown, or at least as close to sundown as possible. What did the Gra do on Motzei Shabbos? So it says, you have to let Shabbos out. So it says he was really pushing because you have basically half an hour. The strict reading of the Talmud seems to give a person half an hour from the sundown to lighting Shabbos candles, Hanukkah candles. The Gra would even light Hanukkah candles before Mariv on Motzei Shabbos, so as to make sure to light those Hanukkah candles within half an hour of the sun setting. So this answers an earlier question. The Vilna Gaon basically did malacha within half an hour of the sun setting on Shabbos when he really had to. So he, even though he lived farther north than we do, Vilna is quite far north. So the farther one is away from the equator, the longer twilight lasts. Leon, if you have anything to add to this, please tell me. But the Vilna Gaon's assumption, I think also this is the way it works. Equator, the faster the stars come out, and the faster the sky becomes gray and the light dims. So we live here in Israel. What are we, like 30 something? Hold on a second, unstable. We're what, 30 something degrees north of the equator. New York is about 40 something. Vilna is close to 60 degrees north of the equator. So they have a much longer twilight than we do. But we see that the Vilna Gaon himself let out his Shabbos significantly earlier than we do, even in places well south of Vilna. Okay, just to know. So that's what we see here. Let me think. What's the more? This is what I wrote to this fellow over here. You want to see the Gra connects the issue of Hanukkah candles at the end of the time of day, which is sundown. He actually separated the two in practice, that he lit the Hanukkah candles at sundown, but held that the fast goes on until later. So that's a little bit hard for us to accept. So we've seen the Vilna Gaon and the laws of Tainus, and the Vilna Gaon and the laws of Hanukkah, where basically insists on these points that when the Talmud says sundown as the line for these things, it says that. But we haven't gotten to the part where it actually seems to be getting complicated. Okay, and now we're going to do that. The Vilna Gaon's Perush on Shabbos, Bar-Hayim 261. And we promise this to everybody, and I'm going to look it over here. This is when the Shulchan Aruch says that one should take in Shabbos basically with the first setting of the sun. The Shulchan Aruch assumes that when sun sets, now it's an optional time to take in Shabbos. Shabbos will come in by the so-called second sunset, which is almost an hour later. And with this first sunset, now begins the time when a person could accept Shabbos early, or a tzibur could accept Shabbos early and perform the commandment of Tosefet Shabbos, adding to the Shabbos, which the Vilna Gaon also disputes. The way the Shulchan Aruch has it is that it's an obligation to add some time to the Shabbos. The Vilna Gaon follows Maimonides, who says it's not an obligation; it's just a nice thing to do. It's only an obligation on Yom Kippur. So that was the first point he makes. The second point is over here. He says this whole idea, this concept of beginning of Shkia and end of Shkia, is according to the opinion of the Tosafis that we mentioned earlier. And then he says, but it is not. Aval Leitha. Leitha in this case means it is not, means the Vilna Gaon doesn't believe it's factually true, whatever the Tosafis describe. And then he brings up his point over here that just Mitzias wise. And this is why he says it. And over here, that's why I bold this is the parts we have to see. The Venash Mashoth matchil mitchilat hashkia techef ad hichsef patachton v'hu gimel rivei mil vofek bavel v'zman tkufat nisan. Venash Mashoth starts immediately with the sunset. See, immediately. He doesn't give room for Rabbi Yossi's opinion. He's basically following Rabbi Yehuda's opinion as understood by Rabbah. That is, it takes 3/4 of a meal. He said Rabbi Yosef would say it's 2/3 of a meal. This is also what you get from Rambam. So he's not going to get involved in Sveikot. Vofek Bavel, which is basically the longitude, the latitude of Bavel. Bavel and Eretz Yisrael basically have similar latitude. Latitude is how many degrees north of the equator. And also at the time of Nisan, basically nice in springtime, or Tishrei, when the days are basically almost even in length. And he says, gamur. With this beginning of Shkia, as they call it, it's completely Ben Hashmashoth. According to the Beis Yosef's and the Rabbeinu Tam's opinion, you have the first Shkia, and it's going to be a while until Ben Hashmashoth starts. When it says Tishka Chama, when the sun sets, that's the beginning of Shkia. Okay, so too with regards to a fast. Kol Tanith Shalosh Shaka Alav. When the sages talked about the fast day being at Shkia, they meant this physical sunset. So the simple understanding of the Talmud is that when the sun sets, it is now permissible to eat. That's the end of this sentence in the Gra, but he has a lot more to say. Okay, so here, like I said, I think this is the Ikar what the Vilna Gaon is saying. Sunset is sunset. Banish Mashoth starts right at sunset. It lasts for 3/4 of a mile walk, and that's when it's over. And already with that first sunset, that's, for example, when they assume the fast ends. And like I said, this is basically also what you would I think undisputably get if you were just reading what Maimonides says, and if you read what the Vilna Gaon wrote in Hilchos Hanukkah and Tainus, but not necessarily what you get from Mila. I'm expecting a question now from you, Leon. Do you have a question at this point or a challenge? No? Okay. You just tell me when, because I know I'm gonna we're basically gonna walking through a minefield now. So then suffix, but we see that there's places to allow for leniency. And then the Vilna Gaon brings up over here the Mordechai. Okay? He says, I am Mordechai. Look at the Mordechai in the first chapter of Tainus, where it says that Nagu lamtin ad seith kokavim. With regards to the ending of the fast, they wait until the stars come out, until nightfall. Mishum d'spakmalam ialacha Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda, o Rabbi Yossi. We have a suffix, this halacha, talking about Banish Mashoth. Is it actually Rabbi Huda or Rabbi Yossi? That's kind of a question. Misapkalon? When are we Misapkalon? I'm going to read you what Rabbi Yochanan says in that page that we brought over here. Rabbi Yochanan says here at the near the bottom. It says here. Hold on 1 second. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. Lochak Rabbi Huda Linan Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan says. By the way, this is a telling thing. Based on this, but over here you see that there's no Maimonidean mark. This statement of Rabbi Yochanan is brought by the Rif, but it seems if you look through the Rambam, this statement of Rabbi Yochanan is not lahalacha because we hold differently. I'll read what Rabbi Yochanan says. I'll explain the halachic consequences, why it is that you can see why Rambam doesn't hold this, and what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda linyan Shabbos. The halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda regarding Shabbos. Halacha Rabbi Yossi linyan Truma. With regards to Rabbi Yossi, with regards to Truma, we follow Rabbi Yossi's opinion. That is the Ben Hashmashoth, and its conclusion is sometime after Rabbi Yehuda's Ben Hashmashoth. So we understand Bishlam halacha Rabbi Yehuda linyan Shabbos the Chumrah. I understand why we would follow Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't understand what Banish Mashoth is, because he tells us that we should take in our Shabbos as early as he says, when the sun actually sets on a Friday. Then Truma, Mikey, what is he talking about with Truma? What's the conclusion? It says that if we're talking about it, when a person should go dunk in the mikvah, that can't be. They dismiss that. It says here, Ella Chilas Truma. It means for eating Truma. When is nightfall that one can eat Truma? Dilachi Kwanim Truma Adishlim Benash Mashoth de Rabbi Yossi. Okay. It means that when the Kohanim are waiting for the day to end, they should only eat their Truma and let the day end according to Rabbi Yossi's opinion, which I said is sometime after Rabbi Yehuda says the day has come to an end. How much longer? Could very well be not that much time. And that's why he brought Tosfos. It could just be a very short amount of time. If you say that they're actually right next to each other, the fact that it seems that it has to be significant time after. So how much after, we don't know. But either way, it means that with regards to eating Truma, waiting for nightfall for eating Truma, we should, Rabbi Yochanan says we're machmir like Rabbi Yossi, and with taking it Shabbos, we're machmir like Rabbi Huda, who says that the sun sets when it sets. Why doesn't the Rambam hold of this line? Because we don't need Rabbi Yochanan according to the Rambam. Rabbi Yochanan says the Kohanim eat their Truma when? Explicitly. The Kohanim eat their Truma according to the time as defined by Rabbi Huda. The sun sets, so that's what we take in Shabbos, even though that's when the suffix starts. And the Kohanim keep their Truma, Uva Shemesh V'Toher, not because of Rabbi Yochanan's rule. So this basically over here is now brought by Vilna Gaon saying, if you have to end the fast, you should be machmir like Rabbi Yossi. Why? The fast ends at sundown. When is sundown? According to Rabbi Yehuda, sundown is sundown, and then there's been a shmashos, then the stars come out. Fine. But according to Rabbi Yossi, the halachic sundown is only after Rabbi Yehuda's halachic nightfall. Okay. So tell me if this isn't clear. But basically, the Vilna Gaon saying that according to this argument, you'd have to, we hold like Rabbi Yochanan, you'd have to take out your fast at sundown, or you'd be allowed to take out your fast at sundown, but it'd have to be Rabbi Yossi's sundown. Rabbi Yossi's sundown, according to this chart, would be sometime after here, because he doesn't hold of this halachic sundown. And that's a problem, because it contradicts things that the Vilna Gaon just said over here, things that we know. The suffix, it's not the Vilna Gaon's derech to suddenly say, you know what, we have to machmir or choshesh for all these different shitas. I'll continue reading here. Don't worry, we'll get out of this. It says here, one I already gave the easiest response is that Rabbi Yochanan says, with regards to two dinim d'oraisa, two biblical laws, I have to take in Shabbos at sunset before the suffix time of day, the twilight time, which could be day, which could be night, because it is a severe biblical prohibition to perform malacha on Shabbos. So too, the Kohanim have to wait for the stars to come out in order for their purity to be affected, because eating truma in a state of impurity is a severe biblical prohibition. And therefore, when it comes to defining night for these Kohanim, we have to be safek l'chumra. We have to rule stringently with regards to this doubt. But with regards to certain fast days, like I said, it's not even a rabbinic enactment. So why do I have to rule stringently? Safek d'Rabbanan l'kula. And the Vilna Gaon will actually say, no, that's not so good either. Why? It says here, Shiur ben Hashmashot Rabbi Yossi Achar Shechzik Moshe Kasav Sham Deshlim ben Hashmashot Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, this ben Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi, it's kind of difficult. These old editions of Vilna Gaon, everything is acronyms. So the Rashi Tevos Rabbi Yossi is identical to that of Rabbi Yehuda. So perhaps it's better to get an edition like I had here, but I took a picture of the Friedman edition. It spells it out for us. Well, if one has to, I think he's still saying like the Mordechai over here, one has to follow Rabbi Yossi with regards to fast days. Why? Rabbi Yossi la'inyan truma. Just like it says the halacha follows Rabbi Yossi with regards to truma over here on Shabbos, Lamed Hey and Aleph, so too with regard to fast days. Like I said, I cannot accept this just as an objective argument because it doesn't follow. And says so you're going to argue back, well, Tainus, we already have one kula. The kula is the fast is supposed to be over at sundown. That's the kula. Sfeiko mutter. You could end the fast at sundown. Fine. Lo mikilin and tre kule lasoth gamkein karav Yehuda. You're allowed to end the fast before the twilight zone, the twilight time. You could end the fast at sunset, but you cannot then have a second kula and use the lenient definition of sunset. You have to use the stringent definition of sunset, which is Rabbi Yossi's definition of sunset. Now, that's kind of unfair because it means there's no nafkamina. With regards to, let's say, the severe fast, I have to keep that until nightfall. So nightfall is sometime after 6. We're going to say nightfall is late as 6:18. And with regards to the minor fasts, I could be makel. I could end that minor fast at sunset, but I still have to use the stringent view of when sunset is, which is basically nightfall. Rabbi Yehuda's nightfall, and like I said, this sort of if you do put Rabbi Yossi's Ben Hashmashos, his sunset, Ben Hashmashos, and nightfall right after that of Rabbi Yehuda's nightfall, there's no real nafkamina. It's like I wrote to this other fellow who was advocating for this seriously. I said, this is almost a joke. I don't believe that Vilna Gaon was saying this in seriousness. He's saying this as a consequence of what the Mordechai says. And if he is saying this, it means that we're talking about the more severe fasts. That perhaps when the Gemara said, Mekilim Seiko Shalom Mutter, it means the ordained fasts as opposed to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, Sveiko is Aser. Ordained fasts, in case of emergency, Sveiko Mutter. Okay, the Gra continues. Look in the rush over there, the end of the second paragraph of Shabbos, Mark 23. He says, whatever he says there about ending the fast, they're sort of surprising, they're difficult to accept. Okay? It seems that this is a good argument. If you make all these assumptions, we should be letting our fast out like Rabbi Yossi, just like Rabbi Yochanan was machmir for Rabbi Yossi's opinion with regards to Truma. And for Shabbos, And in Shabbos, we take in Shabbos when the sun sets. So I have over here that I like I said, this argument that Gra is bringing up in the name of the Rush, which is based on the Rush and the Mordechai, and this two kulas. We don't have a kula. We don't use two kulas in one shot. Is I think facetious. That is this argument based on Tosfos and the Rush, and it makes a bunch of assumptions that the Gra himself rejected already. It can't be. And the Gra continues over here. It says, once again, the Vilna Gaon had been insisting that we follow sundown means sundown. So when it comes to Hanukkah, lighting your Hanukkah candles, it's the beginning of the Shkia, when the sun sets. And he says you find it in the Ran and the Rashba. This is something you could find above also. We saw this. And you can also find this in the Torah. And look at the Ran. And he also says, in that which they wrote regarding Shabbos, if a person wants to know Rav Yechemia's Shiur, there's an opinion. The Gemara, it says another way to find out how long Ben Hashmashos is wait for the sun to set, watch it from basically Haifa, and then when you see the sun set on the Mediterranean, run down, take a dunk in the sea, and then run back up. That's the time between. That's the Ben Hashmashos time. Interesting time. And he also says, Alma Ben Hashmashos miad tishka. He's saying that a person has a time here when the sun sets, and then he runs down, like I said, runs all the way down to the sea and comes back up. So that's the time. He also tells you to look in the Rashba. And he had some difficulties there. We're going to skip some of the Vilna Gaon over here. He has more explanations as to why the definition of nightfall has to follow the Gaonim. Okay, that's also very important. The Vilna Gaon has to entirely destroy the Rabbeinu Tam, and therefore the Beis Yosef's definition of nightfall. Here's some halachic ramifications, okay, regarding what Shkia means. From what I've written, okay, halachically, this is Ikar halacha. Ben Hashmashot is right when the sun sets. Okay, not like Rabbi Yossi, not like Rabbeinu Tam. This Ben Hashmashot is between the sunset and this description of when the sky is turning gray and the reddening of the sky, like Leon described, which I do not know enough about. And he also says, what's the nafkamina? Dam nifsal bishkiat achama. There was a slaughtered sacrifice there in the temple courtyard. So the Kohanim were supposed to catch the blood and then apply the blood to the altar. And if the sun sets, let's say they slaughtered the animal, and somehow they got slow, or they were mixing the blood. It says there was cases on Yom Kippur to prevent the blood from clotting before they would apply it on the altar. So they would continue stirring the blood. So whatever it is, he's stirring the blood. For whatever reason, the application has slowed down. Perhaps the ruling judges say that, wait, there might be something wrong with this korban. Don't apply its blood to the altar so fast. Whatever it is, if the sun sets, so the sacrifice is disqualified. The Vilna Gaon is saying, God willing, when we rebuild the temple, we should not be following Rabbeinu Tam or others' definition of sunset. Let's say Rabbi Yossi's definition of when sunset is, whenever that would be. Instead, once the sun physically sets, then the blood should not be applied to the altar. It's already been disqualified. Also, with regards to mincha, okay, mincha, the time for daven mincha ends at sunset. We don't give you more time after sunset to daven mincha, even though, according to Rabbeinu Tam and others, perhaps I should say Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi is the first one, I guess, in history here, at least chronologically speaking, the first one to say that perhaps sundown is not physical sundown, halachic sundown. And he also says that's when Shabbos begins, and also with Mariv. Okay, after the sun goes down, you could daven Mariv. You can't say Kriyat Shema. Kriyat Shema is only with nightfall. Nightfall and Kriyat Shema and Mariv are actually two different standards. We put the two together all the time, but like the Mishnah Berurah even points out, perhaps you shouldn't. If you're davening Mariv early, that is Mariv sometime before the stars have come out, you should not be saying the Kriyat Shema. Repeat Kriyat Shema, because you're saying once it's par Mariv, perhaps it shouldn't be said at all as part of this evening service. So Shkia is the line between Mincha and Mariv. Mincha ends at Shkia. Mariv begins after Shkia, unless of course it's a Friday or Motzei Shabbos, where there's a special dispensation to pray Mariv earlier. He says this is the line. And he says, but it's still difficult. When we wrote earlier, if you hold, like we wrote earlier, all these other opinions, that with regards to the fast day doesn't have this line. Even though all these other halachas, it's clear from the Talmud that the line between these is sundown. Sundown, is clearly sundown, and that's the cutoff point. For the Tainus, the Gemara says that, but that's not the practical case. We have to wait until nightfall. So he continues over here, and he gives this argument over here. In kain kasha kushias tosfos sham. This is also what Leon brought up. That's the Tosfos there that says that perhaps Rabbi Yossi's sundown is significantly after Rabbi Yehuda's sundown. So it's a big kasha, because maybe we should be waiting quite long for the end of Rabbi Yossi's nightfall to let out our fasts. And he says these answers are dachuk mode. And here's the Vilna Gaon's answer, which I think is something we have to be very careful with and read many times over. Achar ha'iyun, nirali ha'ikar, shein lazuz mimenu, the ta'ut nafal basfarim. I'm going to correct it. There must have been a mistake in the books. Okay? A mistake in the books, which is over here, this line over here. The line of Rabbi Yochanan. The lo achli kohanim truma ad dishlim ben hashmashot the Rabbi Yosei. The kohanim should only eat truma, and once we've completed the ben hashmashot of Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi Yossi's definition of nightfall. That's Rabbi Yochanan's chumrah. He says here, the lo achli kohanim truma ad dishlim ben hashmashot the Rabbi Yehuda. The kohanim should only be eating truma after the ben hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda. See, we're not machmir for Rabbi Yossi's opinion at all with regards to truma, and there's no reason to be machmir for Rabbi Yossi's opinion with regards to fast days by kal v'chomer. The ben hashmashot biyad the vivid ben hashmashot at ben hashmashot biyad muter lechol truma. Okay, means at the end of the ben hashmashot, then you could eat the truma. K'moshe chatav uva shemesh v'toher, like the pasuk says, and which is brought in Maseches Brachos, and the Rama brings out halacha. The sun sets for the kohanim, and then the sky is purified, and that's when the stars come out. That's when the kohanim can eat truma, and now there's no contradiction between these things. So suddenly, Rabbi Yochanan, like I said, Rambam doesn't hold the Rabbi Yochanan statement. He seems to say that Rabbi Yehuda's time of nightfall is good enough for the kohanim to eat the truma, and the Vilna Gaon actually answers that over here. That's what he says, and that's a very important answer to the question. So those in Rabbeinu Tam's camp are mistaken for thinking they need to wait for Rabbi Yossi's ben hashmashos to end, or even those not in Rabbeinu Tam's camp. You don't have to wait for Rabbi Yossi's ben hashmashos to end in order to eat and in a fast, because the kohanim don't have to wait for that point in order to eat their truma. And I think that's a good enough answer. That's why I put it in bold over here, what the Vilna Gaon says. We saw this earlier. I think also in Yoredea, it's not on this screen. I'll go find it for us there. Yoredea, the Rambam brings this up also, this idea that there's a child born during Ben Hashmashot on a given day. So when is that child's bris? Normally the bris is on day 8. The day the child is born, however long that day might last, that is day 1. And this it makes it interesting. If you have a child born, let's say tomorrow morning, Friday, or even tonight, the child will be born tonight. It's 8:52 p.m. Jerusalem time here. A child is born right now at Shaarei Tzedek. And then tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m., another child will be born. Almost, 18 hours later. Okay, 18 hours from now. Both children are halachically born on Friday, even though one child is born at night on Friday, halachic Friday, and one child is born in the middle of the afternoon on Friday. Their bris will be, for both of them, they'll have their bris at Friday morning in a week from today. So Friday to Friday. The next Friday is day 8. It's not 8 full days afterwards, it's just the 8th day from his birth. Now, what about the child who's going to be born tomorrow afternoon after the sun sets, but before the stars come out? So that child is born in Suffolk, in a time of twilight, the Suffolk. So we can't make his bris Friday because it could very well be that he's born on Shabbos. So we can't make his bris on Shabbos. That's what we do, just push it off to Shabbos. Well, it'll be either day 8 or it's even day 9 now. And we say, no, the problem is we can't give him a bris on Shabbos because he's actually just a Suffolk who was born on Shabbos. The only child who gets a bris on Shabbos is a child who's definitely born on Shabbos, so we could certify that. So this child's bris will actually be on Sunday. If a child is born on a Monday night at twilight, so we can't make his bris the next Monday. There's a suffix there, so we'll push it off to Tuesday, until Tuesday. So that's what the Gemara there is discussing. They say that in this case I brought up, child born late Friday as Shabbos is coming in. So Friday is day 1. The next Friday is day 8. Day 8 is no good for his bris because he might have been very well born on Shabbos. Day 9 is Shabbos. He can't be brist on Shabbos because he was just a suffix born on Shabbos. So he gets his bris on day 10. That's what he says. That's halachically. Halachically, day 10, it might well just be his ninth day, but that's what the Shulchan Aruch rules. It's a general assumption there. So the Vilna Gaon brings up all these points about suffix, whether it's part of the day or the night. So I'll put that on the screen because it's important that we see all these cases where he seems to bring this up again. This whole case. Please tell me if you could see this. I'm sure, by the way, my disputant will have a lot to say here, so this might not be the last we have to say. Like I said, if there's more information that comes to light, we would like to see it. Here is the Vilna Gaon's Pirush on Yoredea, Mark 266. Okay, for my own purposes. Here it says, B'Yashir Shenash Mashoth, Efligu Tanoi V'Amoroi. With regards to how long Benash Mashoth is, there was a dispute between the sages of the Talmud, the Tanaim and Amoraim. It's in the Parak Malikin. We discussed this. Rabba and Rav Yosef. The Baal Itur says, Misafgalon halacha kedivrei mi. We don't know who the halacha follows. Hilkach ith yaliv yanuka michashishka chama. The child's born after the sun sets. Safeku adish lim benash mashot. That's a suffix until benash mashot is over. The Rabbi Yossi. We're machmir for Rabbi Yossi's benash mashot. Like the uncorrected text of the Talmud that we have in front of us. The Vilna Gaon says, Rabbi Yochanan said, with regards to these things, we're worried that maybe Rabbi Yossi's opinion is the correct one. So we'll take in Shabbos from Rabbi Huda says the sunset, but we'll keep Sil Kohanim only to eat their truma once Rabbi Yossi says night has fallen, which is sometime later, whenever that is. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says, because Rabbi Yochanan had that suffix with regards to eating truma, with regards to the day of the child's bris, which is also a biblical rule, we should follow this suffix. Like I said, the Vilna Gaon's bottom line over there is correct the sefer. It says Rabbi Yochanan's machmir for Rabbi Huda's benash mashot, not Rabbi Yossi's. But regardless, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says over here. And the conclusion is v'nimo la'asara. So the child is actually circumcised on day 10. So he's born at Suffolk, the end of Friday, beginning of Shabbos. His bris will actually take place on Sunday morning. And he says, if he's born on Motzei Shabbos, when the star is coming down, avdin l'chumra karaba. So we'll say that the benash mashos actually persists for 3/4 of a mile after sunset, 3/4 of a mile walk from sunset. That's the Shulchan Aruch in context. And here is the Vilna Gaon's. Excuse me. Let me take another drink. Here's the Vilna Gaon's commentary here on. A lot of this will sound familiar, but there's also a little bit of trouble here. There's some things here are added. You see that in the parentheses. Those who prepared this for printing added it. They added their own commentary here, which is why it's in parentheses, and it's also in Rashi letters. So we'll look at the highlights over here. He says, Dato Kedas Rabbi Yonah, Shekasav, the Flukta Rabbi Yosef Sham, Azlin Chumra. This is a Rabbeinu Yonah we just mentioned. Rabbeinu Yonah is saying that with regards to this machlokas, Rabbi and Rav Yosef, how long does it take to walk how long can a person walk in this time? 2/3 of a mile, like Rav Yosef, or 3/4 of a mile, like Rabbah says. We follow the Chumrah. But the Rif says, no, the halacha always follows Rabbah. And you look in the Rashi, he says that also. Over here, Rabbeinu Yonah brought up the idea of bringing in the fast day. A person accepts the fast day, ben hashmashos mutter. That's not what we're discussing today. Okay. Here, it says here that if you hold like this, Rabbeinu Yonah over here, Deno mutter, if I'm disconnected, please tell me. Deno mutter ad ben hashmashos through Rav Yosef, l'chumra. It's only mutter once Rav Yosef's ben hashmashos is over, 2/3 of let's say 18 minutes after sundown, or even 2/3, 12 minutes after sundown, whatever it is. And that's not true. If we are actually going to be l'chumra and say that it takes a person should be machmir for whatever long amount of time after sunset, they also have to watch out for Rabbi Yossi's time, which is even after that. Remember, this whole thing, 3/4 or 2/3 of a mile from sunset is within Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yossi is more machmir because his sundown is only after Rabbi Yehuda's nightfall. The Shlim ben Hashmashot to Rabbi Yehuda. See, Rabbi Yossi's sundown or ben Hashmashot begins after Rabbi Yehuda's ben Hashmashot is over, as we saw earlier. Halachik Rabbi Yehuda, etc. Also, Gam Perush ben Hashmashot al Acher Tainet Lo Perushum Mefarshim came. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah's problem there is that perhaps they're not talking about after the fast, but they're talking about before the fast. And they're also talking about Tanet Sibur Kagon Eser Achronot. They're talking about the earlier, the last 10 fast days, the extreme fast days. Very important. What are these Eser Achronot? The first few fast days that they impose upon everybody in emergency are what we call the lenient kind. You could eat at night, and you have other leniencies. And the latter 10 fasts, you can't even eat at night, and you're not supposed to be doing malacha. So this is an important point. If you do have this idea that a person should be letting out his fast by the later opinion in the Suf or lenient fasts, and those types of fasts, the chayotze, and those types of fasts like Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, and an argument over here. This is what they put out because why? You have to be machmir in the fast times because you're machmir when Shabbos goes out also. So if it's an extreme fast, you should be machmir like Shabbos. Fine, and that's what it also says in the end of Parak 4 Psachim. And remember that it says here, it's talking about the difference between the other tainuses. Why? How is Tisha B'Av different from the other fast days? Because Tisha B'Av you have to fast. And then he also mentions over here that a tainus should end at sundown. You have this opinion, which we saw earlier, that when it says the fast is over at sundown, it means the sundown, but that happens to be Tzeit HaChochavim because they almost equate the two, especially if you're Rabbeinu Tam. Even though the straight meaning of the Talmud is that sundown is sundown. You don't have to wait until nightfall. So maybe when they said this, they meant it's the final shkia, which for them is very close to their thing. But then again, if you hold of a shkia achrona, you're holding like Rabbeinu Tam, which the Vilna Gaon already rejected. And that's why it says here in parentheses, Zeu lefi das Rabbeinu Tam u'shar poskim, like the Beis Yosef. Well, das Rabbeinu, the Vilna Gaon already disagreed with this. B'likutav b'aschos shkia havi ben hashmashos. The sun sets, that's already ben hashmashos. He doesn't hold of Rabbeinu Tam. He's just bringing this up as, as a point to be made that there's all these different spekos about when everything is. And that is, then the Vilna continues, the sun setting is being ben hashmashos, as we said, also in regards to Hanukkah. That's when you're supposed to light your candles, right? When the sun sets. And then it continues over here. Hold on 1 second. Here, this is the important part. Veneerly, seems to me, the Masha Katva Poskim, Vitani Tvichanika Tzeit. When the poskim, which you could find, like the Beis Yosef and the Tur, say that you should be letting out your fast and lighting your Hanukkah candles at sundown, at Tzeit HaChochavim at nightfall, when you do find this, remember we saw this, the Shulchan Aruch says you light your candles basically at nightfall and you let out the fast at nightfall. Why? Mishum the Kaimalon Rabbi Yossi L'chumra. They're holding, or we're holding, says Kaimalon, even though the Vilna Gaon doesn't hold to this, they'll like Rabbi Yossi L'chumra, the whole Rabbi Yossi thing. Rabbi Yossi's nightfall is sometime after Rabbi Huda. You should be choshesh for that, like Rabbi Yochanan was in certain cases. That's why they come up with this. Mashakot the Brisa the Chanukah Mishadishka Rabbi Hudahi. But when the Brisa regarding Chanukah says you should light your Chanukah candles at sundown, that follows Rabbi Huda. Okay, v'chein Rav Chisda the Tainus. When Rav Chisda says that the Tainus ends at sundown, he's following Rabbi Huda's opinion. But we hold like Rabbi Yochanan. Once again, who's the we? Okay, all the Rabbeinu Tam types. He's saying over here, we hold like Rabbi Yochanan, like we saw on Shabbos, and you should pasuk Rabbi Yossi l'chumra. We hold like, and therefore, even if you could end something at being a ben hashmashos, you still have to worry that it's Rabbi Yossi's definition of ben hashmashos, which is after Rabbi Huda's Tzeis HaKochavim. Why is this line not when the Vilna Gaon says Kaima Lon like Rabbi Yochanan? Who's the Lon? He's speaking in the name of these poskim who we already disagreed with. And like we said in Shabbos, Zil corrects this. We don't really hold like that's a toes sofer, and the Rambam already rejected this also. I think that's that should be enough for now for the confusing nature of all these materials. But I think it should be said that right here, the Talmud clearly says that fast ended at sundown, and there's certain fast that and according to Rabbeinu Tam, it doesn't really matter. Everything ends at nightfall because you don't know when sunset ends. And Rabbi Yossi's opinion is basically impractical. Okay? It's impractical to use Rabbi Yossi's opinion because, like I was trying to speak out before, we don't know when it is necessarily. You have to look for stars, 1 star, 2 star. It was rejected already. So it's not brought up there. With regards to circumcisions, the whole point here is that there are certain points where we are stuck with we're stuck in Safek. What I mean by we're stuck in Safek, when it comes to ending Shabbos, almost saying wait until nightfall and then Shabbos is out. If you're a Kohen and you want to eat your truma, wait until nightfall, then eat your truma. If you want to take in Shabbos or Yom before the sun sets, that's what really matters. However, children being born don't ask questions. Children are born around the clock. And by the way, I think it's also, if not for induced labors, it would be actually equally distributed across the entire week. The women go into labor at all different times of day and all the different days of the week. Babies don't care to be born on Shabbos or to be born on Sunday. So with regards to this, we will have children born at that time of day, which is a safek. And that's why the Vilna Gaon brings up all the different sfeichot over here, the different opinions, because the child will be born. We have to see, once a child is born, what day was he, on which born. So we have a child born, let's say, right after Rabbi Yehuda's sunset. Okay? So right after Rabbi Yehuda's nightfall. And now we're saying perhaps we should be choshesh for Rabbi Yossi's opinion that it's still now just a suffix between the days. So this child still will have his bris pushed off by another day because of the suffix. That's why the Vilna Gaon brings up all these opinions here, not because he's machmir for Rabbi Yossi's opinion with regards to practical halacha that we can have in our hands, what time we should break the fast, what time we should daven, etc. He's bringing this up because when we actually start his bris. It's interesting. They basically held like Rabbeinu Tam for many centuries. When I first became aware of this when I was a teenager, I was wondering, what about Yurtzeit? You have a fellow who was Yurtzeit, by the way, doesn't really matter halacha, but it matters to a lot of people. You have someone who passed away, let's say, today at when was sunset? Sunset was around 5:00. So someone passed away today at 5:10 or even 5:20. Forevermore, when will they say that this fellow passed away? Rabbeinu Tam's way of understanding is that the halachic sunset's closer to 6. This fellow's yurtzeit will always be observed as the 19th of Teves. But according to those who say that, let's say strict Rabbi Yehuda reading, like the Rambam, the sun set at 5. By 5:20, it was already nightfall. It's already the 20th of Teves. So this fellow's yurtzeit will be forevermore the 20th of Teves. There are people who died during this time when people were still holding like Rabbeinu Tam. So their yurtzeit was marked in the book as the 20th of Teves, the next day. The 19th of Teves, the previous day, because it's not really nightfall according to Rabbeinu Tam. And then 70 years later, they've gone to yeshiva and Volozhin and other places, or they're New Yorkers, and they're holding like Rabbeinu Tam, and they're holding like the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam. And those times a day are certainly now part of the next day. They're well after their definition of nightfall. So when are they observing their yurtzeits anymore? Do we suddenly change all the dates of yurtzeits? We see on the guy's death certificate, he died at 5:20 p.m. on the Thursday, January 12th. So will they say, well, at the time, they considered that 19 Teves. But nowadays we consider that the 20th Teves. That's basically what the Vilna Gaon's talking about over here. You have the child born. You have to know, is he born during a time of Safek? And if so, a Safek according to who? If it's a Safek according to an opinion we've already rejected, so we're not going to delay the child's bris. Why should we delay his bris? And perhaps even we have permission to violate Shabbos in order to affect his bris. We're going to say, no, we have to be choshesh because this child is to be circumcised, and that might even result in Chil Shabbos. We should say that any suffix whatsoever about the time of his birth should be taken into account. I don't know. We'll stop it there for questions. And like I said, I hope this explains my position. The fellow who wrote all me this questions has not joined us this evening, but I hope it sufficiently answers that. Yeah. Any questions?
If I could,
Well, yeah, please.
if I could, just deepen the rabbit hole a little bit more.
Please,
the whole sugya about biat shimsho, biat oro. There might be. There's also gears of questions there. The Baal HaMeor and the Aruch have a different reading than what we have, so that it's a tzarich iyun there also.
Yes. Unfortunately, all these times I was just focusing on the Vilna Gaon. One of the things I got when I first started looking at this, I was using the Gemaras I have in my house and the other base matters. And these are new printings of the Gemara. I think this is like an Oz V'Hadar or something like that. Yeah. You're familiar with the Oz V'Hadar?
Yes,
So
I am.
they've corrected a few things. They even redid things. Their editions of the Rishonim are different. And I could have sworn earlier this week, I read something in the Mordechai or the Rush. And then when I'm using these newer, fancier Gemaras, I just can't find it anymore. And I didn't take a picture of it for posterity, and I just driving myself crazy for 3 days looking for it, and I just can't find it. The old Girsas. So yeah, there's what to say about correcting things. Not every time the Vilna Gaon is suggested a correction to the text wasn't incorporated into the text. Sometimes it's just a marginal note. I didn't see a marginal note here. He says, I think there's a Tolos Sofer. There's no note over here saying the Vilna Gaon says to correct this. You notice that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this doesn't even get into these sugyas feature prominently in the Yerushalmi and Brachos, right? Right, the first parak there, right?
Yes.
And I also didn't even get into the thing. I mentioned it that perhaps they used to walk a mile was much shorter, a 9-minute mile walk. Did you see that from Rabbi Buch? There's a YouTube video. It's one of the oldest videos on YouTube where he says that they actually found the place that Chazal were talking about from from Tiberia to Migdal Nunaya to the fish tower,
Mhm.
and it's actually quite shorter than we think. And there's nafkamina. How long does it take bread to rise? Remember that?
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're making a dough from scratch, does it take 72 minutes to rise, or does it take just an hour to rise, or even less? Yeah, I didn't get into all these things. Unfortunately, the Vilna Gaon didn't get into. I was just trying to explain what the Vilna Gaon's particular opinion is, but we could spend a week trying to discuss how long actually is Banish Mashot, and how long does it actually take a man to walk a mile, according to Chazal.
You have Roman mile markers almost in your backyard, really. You have the mile markers basically in your backyard. You could take a hike and time yourself and see how long it takes.
Okay, well, yeah, but they'll say, yeah, but you the problem is if you have das to figure out what you're doing, you might go faster. It's like a person, I guess, walking the fitumo. He's unaware of the consequences of what he is doing. You might actually go slower. I don't know. If you're self-conscious of what you're doing, it changes the whole thing. Yeah, I find that interesting. If it is, I think, as Rabbi Buch suggested, someone please correct me if I'm wrong. Rabbi Buch was suggesting that it takes a lot shorter to walk a mile, not 18 minutes, not 24 minutes, maybe 9 minutes or something like that. So if that's the case, then this changes, the whole sugya gets turned on its head. Be that as it may, I don't believe the Vilna Gaon was arguing for keeping the minor fasts until Tzedek Kochavim. If he brought it up, he's trying to say it's a consequence of other people's shitas, but at the end he doesn't. It doesn't an argument. Whatever arguments made for keeping the fast until Tzedek Kochavim, the Vilna Gaon explicitly and repeatedly rejected out of hand. And he even corrects the whole line that's the basis for doing so. He even changes that line and basically strikes it from our Gemara. So there you go. I'd like to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.